walked onto the View set that Tuesday morning with his signature smile, adjusting his suit jacket as he settled into the guest chair. The studio audience applauded warmly, and co-hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny Hostin welcomed him with genuine enthusiasm. But Joy Behar sat at the end of the table with her arms crossed, a look that Steve couldn't quite read. "Steve Harvey, everyone," Whoopi announced to more applause. "We're so excited to have you here today. Thank you for having me," Steve replied, flashing that million-dollar grin that had made him a household name. "Always a pleasure to be with you ladies." "So, Steve," Sarah began, "your new book about relationships has been flying off the shelves. What inspired you to write another guide for couples?" Steve leaned forward, clearly in his element. "You know, Sarah, after decades of hosting Family Feud and talking to thousands of families, I've learned that communication is everything. When couples stop really listening to each other, that's when problems start." "That's beautiful," Sunny chimed in. "The reviews have been incredible," but Joy Behar shifted in her seat, and Steve noticed her expression hadn't softened. "Joy, you look like you have something to say," he said with a chuckle, trying to keep things light. Joy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, Steve, I've been reading your book, and I have to ask, don't you think it's a little hypocritical for someone who's been married 3 times to be giving relationship advice?" The studio fell silent. The other co-hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Steve's smile faltered for just a moment before returning. "Joy, I think my experiences, both good and challenging, actually give me more insight into what works and what doesn't," Steve replied carefully. "Every relationship teaches us something." "But Steve," Joy pressed on, "you've publicly talked about your first 2 marriages ending in divorce. How can you sit here and tell other people how to make their marriages work when you couldn't make yours work?" Whoopi tried to jump in. "Joy, I think what Steve is saying is that—" "No, Whoopi, let him answer," Joy interrupted. "I think our viewers deserve to know why they should take relationship advice from someone with such a track record." "Well, 1. I think our viewers—" Steve's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "Joy, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at here, but I've been happily married to my wife Marjorie for over 15 years. We have a beautiful blended family. And yes, I learned from my past mistakes. That's what growth looks like." "Growth?" Joy scoffed. "Or is it just good marketing? I mean, how convenient that your personal struggles become best-selling books." The audience began to murmur, sensing the tension building. Sarah looked mortified, and Sunny appeared ready to intervene. But Joy wasn't finished. "And another thing, Steve, your comedy specials from the 90s, some of that material about women, it's pretty dated now, don't you think? How do we know your relationship advice isn't just more of the same outdated thinking?" Steve set down his coffee mug with more force than necessary. "Joy, I came here to talk about helping people build stronger relationships, not to be attacked for things I said decades ago as a comedian. Comedy evolves, people evolve, and I think my track record speaks for itself." "Does it, though?" Joy shot back. "Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're profiting off of giving advice about something you've struggled with yourself. And frankly, some of your past comments about women suggest you might not be the best person to be telling them how to find love." The other hosts looked stunned. Whoopi tried again to redirect. "Maybe we should talk about the positive feedback the book has received." "No, Whoopi," Steve said firmly, his voice taking on an edge. "Joy wants to have this conversation. Let's have it. Joy, you're sitting here trying to tear me down in front of millions of viewers. And for what? What's your agenda here?" Joy leaned back with a satisfied smirk. "My agenda is truth, Steve. I think our viewers deserve to know who they're taking advice from. And honestly, your defensive reaction is pretty telling." "Defensive?" Steve's voice rose slightly. You're attacking my character, my marriage, my career, and you want me to just smile and nod? That's not happening. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Harvey, everyone, Joy said sarcastically, gesturing toward him. This is what happens when you ask legitimate questions. He falls apart. Steve stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not falling apart, Joy. I'm calling out your unprofessional behavior. This isn't journalism. This is character assassination. The studio audience was completely silent now, some covering their mouths in shock. The other co-hosts looked like deer in headlights, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation continue. Sit down, Steve, Joy commanded. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? Steve let out a bitter laugh. Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television. And you think I'm the one embarrassing myself? You know what's embarrassing? A grown woman who thinks bullying is good television. Joy's face flushed red. Bullying? I'm asking you legitimate questions that any responsible journalist would ask. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be on talk shows. Legitimate questions? Steve's voice was getting louder. You started this interview with an attack. You didn't ask about my book, my family, my work, my philanthropy. You went straight for the throat. That's not journalism. That's a hit job. Oh, please. Joy rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. This is how interviews work in the real world, Steve. We don't just throw you softball questions so you can promote your book. Steve pointed at her, his composure finally cracking. Joy, I've done thousands of interviews in my career. I've been on every major network, every major show. I know the difference between tough questions and personal attacks. What you're doing is the latter. Whoopi finally found her voice. Maybe we should take a commercial break. No, Steve said firmly. Joy started this, and we're going to finish it right here, right now. Joy crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair with a defiant expression. Fine, Steve. Let's finish this. You want to talk about personal attacks? Let's talk about how you've made a career out of stereotyping women and now you're trying to rebrand yourself as some relationship guru. The hypocrisy is stunning. Steve's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Joy, you clearly have some personal issue with me, because this level of hostility isn't normal. Did I offend you somehow? Did I hurt your feelings at some industry event? Because this feels personal. Don't flatter yourself, Joy snapped. This isn't personal. This is about accountability. You can't just reinvent yourself and expect everyone to forget your past. My past? Steve's voice cracked with incredulity. Joy. My past includes growing up homeless, sleeping in my car, working my way up from nothing to build a media empire that employs hundreds of people. My past includes giving millions to charity and mentoring young comedians. But you want to focus on jokes I told 30 years ago? Joy waved her hand dismissively. Oh, here comes the sob story. Steve, plenty of people overcome adversity without making degrading comments about women along the way. Sarah finally spoke up, her voice shaking. Joy, I think maybe we should. Stay out of this, Sarah. Joy cut her off sharply. Steve wants to have this conversation. Steve stepped closer to the table, his voice rising. You know what, Joy? You're right. I do want to have this conversation. Because I'm tired of people like you who think you can tear down someone's entire life's work because you disagree with some jokes they told decades ago. I've apologized for anything that was inappropriate. I've grown, I've evolved, but that's not enough for people like you, is it? People like me? Joy's eyebrows shot up. What exactly do you mean by that, Steve? I mean people who are so miserable in their own lives that they have to destroy others to feel better about themselves. Steve fired back. You're sitting here on national television trying to humiliate me. Because what? It makes you feel important? The audience gasped audibly. Joy's face turned bright red. How dare you? You don't know anything about my life. I know enough, Steve shot back. I know that happy people don't go out of their way to tear others down. I know that secure people don't need to ambush guests on their own show. And I know that professional journalists don't let their personal feelings turn an interview into a circus. Joy slammed her hand on the table. You want to talk about circus? You're the one standing up screaming like a child who didn't get his way. I'm standing because you've been disrespecting me for the last 15 minutes. And I'm not going to sit here and take it anymore. Steve roared. You think because you're behind that desk you can say whatever you want? You think you can attack my character, my marriage, my career, and I'm just supposed to smile and say thank you? Whoopi tried desperately to regain control. Everybody just take a breath. No, Whoopi. Steve whirled around to face her. I appreciate you trying to help, but I need to say this. Joy has been planning this ambush from the moment I walked in here. This wasn't about asking tough questions. This was about humiliating me on television. Joy leaned forward aggressively. Nobody planned anything, Steve. You're paranoid. I asked you legitimate questions about your credibility, and you completely melted down. This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people question your advice. My credibility? Steve laughed bitterly. Joy, what's your credibility? What relationships have you saved? What families have you helped? What positive impact have you made on anyone's life? All you do is sit behind that desk and tear people down for entertainment. I'm a journalist, Joy shouted. I hold people accountable. You're not a journalist, Steve exploded. You're a talk show host with an attitude problem. Real journalists ask tough questions with respect. They don't ambush their guests and then act surprised when they fight back. The studio was in complete chaos now. Audience members were whispering frantically to each other, some pulling out their phones. The other co-hosts looked mortified, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation continue. Joy stood up now too, facing Steve across the table. You know what your real problem is, Steve. You can't handle being challenged by a woman. That's what this is really about. Steve's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you kidding me right now? Joy? Some of the strongest people in my life are women. My wife, my daughters, my mother who raised me. This has nothing to do with you being a woman. This has to do with you being unprofessional and nasty. Nasty? Joy's voice reached a new octave. I'm nasty for asking you hard questions? You're nasty for the way you asked them. Steve shot back. You didn't ask hard questions. You made accusations. You didn't interview me. You attacked me. And now you're trying to make this about gender because you know you're wrong. I'm not wrong about anything, Joy screamed. You came on this show expecting us to just fawn over you and promote your book. And when I asked you real questions, you couldn't handle it. Real questions, Steve was incredulous. Joy, your first question was calling me a hypocrite. Your second question was attacking my past marriages. Your third question was bringing up comedy material from the 90s. Those weren't questions. Those were personal attacks. Sunny finally found her voice. Maybe we should all just calm down, and... Don't tell me to calm down! Both Steve and Joy yelled at the same time, then glared at each other. This is unbelievable, Steve muttered, running his hands through his hair. I came here to talk about helping couples communicate better. And instead, I'm being attacked by someone who clearly has never learned how to have a respectful conversation. Joy pointed an accusatory finger at him. The only person being disrespectful here is you. You're the one who started yelling. You're the one who made this personal. I made this personal? Steve's voice cracked with disbelief. Joy, you literally started this interview by questioning my character. How is that not personal? Because it's relevant to what you're selling. Joy fired back. If you're going to give relationship advice, People have a right to know about your relationship history. Fine. Steve threw his hands up. Then ask about it professionally. Don't start an interview by calling someone a hypocrite. Don't attack their past marriages like you're trying to embarrass them. Ask real questions with respect. I don't owe you respect, Joy snapped. You earn respect. The studio fell silent at those words. Even Joy seemed to realize she had gone too far. Steve stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with anger. You know what, Joy? Steve's voice was suddenly very quiet, which somehow made it more intimidating. You just told me, on national television, in front of millions of viewers, that you don't owe me basic human respect. And you wonder why I'm upset. Joy shifted uncomfortably, but doubled down. I meant you have to earn my professional respect as a guest. No, Steve shook his head slowly. That's not what you said. You said you don't owe me respect. Period. And that tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. The studio remained eerily quiet as Steve's words hung in the air. Joy's face had gone pale, realizing the weight of what she had just said on national television. But instead of backing down, she chose to double down on her aggression. Don't try to twist my words, Steve, Joy said, though her voice lacked the confidence it had before. You know what I meant. Steve took a step back and looked directly into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen watching at home, you just heard Joy Behar say that she doesn't owe me respect. Not professional respect. Not courtesy. Just respect as a human being. And I want you to remember that the next time someone tells you that bullying is wrong, stop being so dramatic. Joy snapped, but Steve wasn't finished. You want to know what's dramatic, Joy? Dramatic is ambushing a guest on your show. Dramatic is attacking someone's personal life to try to discredit their professional work. Dramatic is sitting behind that desk like you're some kind of judge and jury, deciding who deserves basic human decency. Joy's hands were shaking now. Your job? Steve laughed coldly. Joy, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I know what good journalism looks like. I know what professional interviews look like. And this ain't it. Whoopi made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Steve, maybe we can start over. And Steve held up his hand to stop her. Whoopi, I respect you. And I respect Sarah and Sunny. You ladies are professionals. But I will not sit here and be disrespected by someone who thinks that tearing people down is entertainment. Joy stood up again, her face flushed with anger. Nobody's tearing you down. You're being overly sensitive. Overly sensitive? Steve's voice rose to a roar. Joy, you spent 20 minutes attacking my character, my marriages, my career, and my past. And when I defend myself, I'm being overly sensitive? Are you listening to yourself? I asked you legitimate questions. Joy screamed back. No, you didn't. Steve exploded. A legitimate question would be, Steve, how do your past experiences inform your current relationship advice? What you said was, isn't it hypocritical for someone who's been married 3 times to give relationship advice? Do you see the difference? Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in the entire interview, she seemed at a loss for words. Steve continued, his voice filled with righteous anger. A legitimate question would be, how has your comedy evolved over the years? What you said was, your old material is dated and suggests you might not be the right person to give women advice. That's not journalism, Joy. That's a hit job. I was holding you accountable. Joy finally found her voice again. Accountable for what? Steve demanded. For growing as a person? For learning from my mistakes? For building a successful career and happy marriage? For helping millions of people through my work? What exactly am I supposed to be accountable for? One? Joy's face was now bright red with embarrassment and rage. For your past comments. for your previous marriages, for profiting off relationship advice. And there it is, Steve pointed at her triumphantly. You just admitted it. You're not holding me accountable for anything I've done wrong. You're holding me accountable for living my life, for having a past, for making mistakes and learning from them. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Steve turned to address the other co-hosts. Ladies, I want to apologize to you and to your viewers for what this has become. I came here in good faith to talk about something I'm passionate about, helping people build better relationships. I never expected to be ambushed like this. Don't apologize for me, Joy interjected angrily. Steve whirled around to face her one final time. I'm not apologizing for you, Joy. I'm apologizing to everyone else who had to witness your unprofessional behavior. You want to know what real accountability looks like? It looks like admitting when you're wrong. It looks like treating people with respect, even when you disagree with them. It looks like asking tough questions without resorting to personal attacks. Joy's voice became shrill. I don't need lessons from you about how to do my job. Clearly you do, Steve shot back. Because what you did here today wasn't journalism. It wasn't entertaining. And it certainly wasn't professional. It was just mean-spirited and ugly. How dare you? Joy screamed. How dare I what? Steve demanded. How dare I defend myself? How dare I call out your behavior? How dare I refuse to be your punching bag? Which one of those things bothers you the most, Joy? Joy was practically hyperventilating now. You're trying to make me look bad. Steve stared at her in amazement. Joy, I don't have to make you look bad. You're doing that all by yourself. Every word that comes out of your mouth is making you look worse. Every attack, every insult, every unprofessional comment is showing the audience exactly who you are. I know who I am. Joy shrieked. Do you? Steve asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who gets their kicks from hurting other people. You look like someone who thinks that being cruel makes them tough. You look like someone who has forgotten that there's a human being on the other side of your attacks. Joy's eyes filled with tears of rage. I am not cruel. Then prove it, Steve challenged. Apologize. Show the audience that you're capable of admitting when you've gone too far. Show them that underneath all that anger, there's still a decent person. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. All eyes were on Joy, waiting to see what she would do. For a moment, it seemed like she might actually apologize. Might show some humility. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at him defiantly. I have nothing to apologize for. Steve nodded slowly, as if that response confirmed everything he had been saying. And there it is, folks. Joy Behar, ladies and gentlemen. A woman who thinks that basic human decency is optional, that professional courtesy is a suggestion, and that being right is more important than being kind. Get out. Joy screamed. Just get out. Steve smiled for the first time since the interview began, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. Gladly. But Joy, before I go, I want to say one more thing. You've spent the last 30 minutes trying to tear me down, trying to embarrass me, trying to make me look bad. And all you've done is show everyone watching exactly who you really are. And I feel sorry for you. I don't want your pity. Joy yelled as Steve began walking toward the exit. Steve paused and looked back at her one final time. It's not pity, Joy. It's compassion. Because someone who needs to hurt other people to feel good about themselves is someone who's clearly hurting inside. And I hope you get the help you need. With that, Steve Harvey walked off the view set, leaving behind a stunned audience, mortified co-hosts, and Joy Behar standing alone at the table, trembling with rage and humiliation. As the cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a heated interview that got out of hand. This was a complete meltdown, broadcast live for millions to see. that would change how people viewed both Steve Harvey and Joy Behar forever. The silence that followed Steve's exit was deafening.